morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for coming to CTS. My name is Steve Makaitis. I'm the lead network solutions engineer for C3. Pleased to introduce the panel this morning, one of the first, Securing the Flow, Architecting Resilience through SASE, SD-WAN, and ZTNA. So in this session, we're going to be exploring how ZTNA, SD-WAN, and SASE overall are driving performance, strengthening security, and simplifying the network management for resilient enterprises. So I have with me today our wonderful panelists that we're thankful to grace the stage with me today. We've got Mike Henry, who's the principal technologist from LightEdge. We've got Matt Fredrickson, who's the principal solution architect for Mariaka. And we've got Todd Draper, who's the Director of Solutions Architecture from Comcast Business. All right, guys, so I wanted to kind of start pretty high level and talk about the previous months of the year and kind of where we might be going from here. So what are the biggest architectural shifts you've seen in 2025 in the network and security space? And what are you anticipating we're going to see in 2026?
I'll go. Yeah, so hello, everybody. What I would say is probably a word we're going to say a lot today is SASE. But really moving from the conversation of it to people actually starting to do it. And then I think rolling into 2026, we're going to start to have a little bit more conversations on edge compute. Not quite there yet to roll it out, but I think that'll be the next big thing that people start talking about in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is a major shift this year for a lot of the organizations that I've been working with. It's kind of twofold. One is repatriation, moving into things like edge compute and other things out of the hyperscalers and trying to contain their costs or maintain a better posture for redundancy security. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot more adoption of software as a service and going full into the cloud through their software as a service providers and trying to maintain all of those moving pieces at the same time. So it's a very, very unique time that you went from moving your data center into the cloud. Now you're moving it out of the cloud, keeping parts of it in the cloud, and then moving specific applications into other people's clouds. So having a network that can keep up with that has been one of those major challenges that we've had to focus on.
I think I would double down on what the two of you said. We've seen, over the years, a lot of adoption of SASE and SD-WANs really started at the remote locations, the parts that were easy to roll into the core network. And as you see those workloads shift into the public cloud providers, we're kind of seeing that next wave, like you guys were referring to, of hybridization or multi-cloud strategies. A lot of customers now are taking those workloads and they're diversifying them. There's cost reasons behind it. There's service availability type reasons for that. Not every workload runs right in one cloud. A lot of our customers are looking for diversity in those workloads. And as you see that, you almost see a similar thing that happened 20 years ago when the frame relay ATM networks all kind of collapsed into MPLS. You had private networks built around these core mainframes, these core systems that had high cost sitting in data centers. We're kind of seeing, a continuation of that, if you will. SASE needing to extend out across the edge, across these hybrid environments to kind of support the security benefits of that kind of architecture in these multi-cloud hybrid environments.
So Matt, how, speaking of Ariaka specifically here, how are enterprises adopting SASE to secure hybrid workforces and cloud environments? I mean, specifically, how are you helping those clients on those journeys?
So to give an example, we have one client that they had those hybrid workloads. They moved maybe an SAP server and then went into the cloud, distributed 6 of those around the globe so that they could meet with the performance of those users in region and be able to actually have that function in the way that they invested in. But quickly realized that just that cost continues to scale and go up and up and up. So what we did was take our private core backbone. with our complete WAN optimization technology and reduce them down to two, a primary location and then a secondary redundant location, with all their global users still being able to get the performance using our optimized backbone and our WAN optimization technology, but reducing that total footprint and the long-term operating expense of a large distribution out there, and still serve them, still be able to apply roles-based access controls and keep those environments very secure.
Todd, is there anything you wanted to add there, from the Comcast perspective?
Really, I think the migration in looking at everything holistically and looking at SASE is not just a specific product, but part of a larger picture and a larger agenda, I think is very important. And taking into account what we would do at Comcast with that would be having the regional gateways around to help get to those secure web gateways, have your security up there in the cloud, be able to have that one point, cut down the backhauling from maybe hairpinning back to a data center or head end, and really cutting down that latency there as well.
Fantastic. Mike, I wanted to ask you, Light Edge is maybe a little bit different than what Ariaka and Comcast do, but you play very well together. How is Light Edge working with SASE providers like Ariaka and Comcast, similarly to secure those hybrid workflows?
That's a great question. So Light Edge is primarily a hybrid cloud service provider. We own and operate about 13 data centers across the U.S. And like the customer you talked about with the J.D. Edwards application, one of Light Edge's superpowers, if you will, is IBM mid-range. We are the largest mid-range cloud provider in the United States. We're bigger than IBM. And those workloads are very similar to J.D. Edwards in that they're very latency sensitive, right? Those AS400, those IBM AIX workloads, they're basically databases, right? So a lot of customers come to us and say, I have a hyperscaler first strategy. I want to move my workload into AWS or Azure, but I'm banking, I'm medical, I'm manufacturing, I have that core database on something like mid-range. What can I do? Well, we've built a strategy over the years to kind of put those workloads close to companies like AWS so we can give that latency sensitive experience, latency adjacent experience to the customers. And then we work pretty extensively with customers or partners like Comcast, like Ariaka. Our customers are typically bringing in the providers of choice, the networks of choice, and connecting those into our data centers. So we're very familiar with both of you. Comcast has network pops in some of our data centers. So it's a tight partnership. You need to kind of work with all three aspects of it, if you will, to solve the problem.
Great. Switching gears a little bit here. Matt, I wanted to ask you about vendor sprawl and simplification. How are enterprises managing the complexity with multiple providers and platforms? You mentioned SaaS, we've got private cloud, public cloud.
So just in the security space alone, and this, I looked this up just the other day, 82 vendors that most large enterprises consume for just security. 82 vendors on specific small, maybe microservice point solutions or broad services or something else, and there's a ton of overlap in all of those things. So one of the true benefits of SASE is really taking that network, taking the security pieces, getting as much as you need and trying to identify all that overlap, or at least take control and get visibility to where that occurs so that you can really get your arms around that total expense sprawl, the operational sprawl that comes with that, the complexity of all the different pockets and siloed organizations that some of you may have in your companies, where if you look at visibility, that gets so lost so fast, especially with all these new initiatives. AI today, what do we want AI to do? We want it installed. When do you want it? Today. And you see just that responsive action from the C-level suites, and what are you doing with it? How do you monitor it? How do you control it? How do you stop the shadow AI from emerging and becoming a problem? Well, not taking a box solution for a firewall, a network appliance for your SD-WAN and all those things, and even try and stitch them together with yet another tool to consolidate the visual.
Great. So I guess, I mean, this question might be relevant to a lot in the room. For Todd, is consolidation the path forward, or is there the best of breed approach still successful for clients? I mean, we do see this all the time. I mean, both sides of the same coin. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
So and really to your point, I don't think you're ever going to be able to have one vendor. Overall, I think that's the goal, is to have as much with one vendor as possible, that one hand to shake. And I think you've seen organizations get deeper into the stack. Instead of just having SD-WAN, now they're providing the switches, now they're providing the APs, the cameras, the cloud, everything else, to where you can knock out a large percentage of what you have from one vendor. So I think there's definitely a migration to have that approach statistically for as much as you can do. You're never going to get away from having those specific applications or partners that do one specific thing very well. You're still going to always have that no matter what. That's never going to leave. But I think generally speaking, overall, we're seeing more and more of wanting to consolidate circuits and have the same SD-WAN provider. It's becoming more rare that someone would manage their circuits and that somebody else would manage the rest of the environment. And it takes away the finger pointing, especially with that management. Is it the SD-WAN's box fault? Is it the circuit's fault? And I think that's a great combination to have as one product, and then you find those niche products where you need to get the best of breed.
Absolutely. All right, one of the biggest pieces of the SASE framework, in my opinion, is ZTNA, Zero Trust. So, for all three of you guys, how are you using ZTNA to support identity-driven access in today's distributed workforce? How are you implementing that? What are the pitfalls that you've seen from implementations as organizations have transferred more to a zero trust type of model?
I'd say from our perspective as a cloud provider, we tend to see a lot of adoption and interest in zero trust architectures from a sensitive platform architecture standpoint. You've got a lot of these core environments. They're holding kind of the crown jewels, if you will, of the customer's environment. There's a lot of interest in securing and kind of moderating, if you will, the access into those environments. We worked with a company about a year ago that was probably an earlier adopter in their market space of being a zero VPN type approach or architecture, right? They had an edict from top down that said, we're getting rid of all entry points into our network. We're going to run it all through, an architecture like a Zscaler type, environment. And everybody that worked with that customer had to adopt or adapt their management methodology to get into all those systems. You imagine a large retailer with a variety of different, systems that were being managed from the outside. So I think we tend to see, where SASE starts with the network a lot of times. We at least see the zero trust tends to start more with application owners, security teams, get rolled out to kind of protect those core assets and control access into it. You need to think about the network, though. A lot of times, those zero trust architectures have tight ties to where SASE is and where it's going. So there's definitely some need to collaborate on those initiatives in the future.
So we look at it as the ZTNA component of the SASE environment is critical, right? The whole point of SASE is being able to control that full edge, have control over everything that your users or your contractors or whatever come in and do. So zero trust, meaning that first gateway, do we trust them? No, we don't. This is no longer trust but verify. This is, war is out on everything. Your user just logged in from, I don't know, the hotel Wi-Fi, picked up a bug, and now you need to make sure that endpoint at least has gone through the posture check that's required to connect to the network so that we know that it's not just going to be sprawl and spread. But at the same time, that guy in the hotel is probably not sitting there just having a casual breakfast because he travels for fun. He's got important work to be done. He needs to get his PowerPoint for his presentation. He needs to get the documents and the blueprints for his client, whatever that is. So he still needs access to that network to finalize things for whatever reason he's out on that business trip for. So that zero trust access becomes that critical component of, all right, let's make sure that this is the right person. And now that we know, let's make sure that he can complete his job and we don't lose any visibility to it. We don't introduce what the FBI agent this morning was saying. These tools are helping us, but they're also helping the criminals. So let's stop that right at that edge. And that's what our zero trust does, so that if they have an agent that sits on there, they can be connected very, very fluidly, get full advantage of WAN optimization, delivery to SaaS applications, but at the same time, if they're a contractor, give them something like a reverse proxy where they only get access into your network, or the applications that are required as that contractor's role, and have controls about when to shut them off and turn them back on again.
Yeah, and I think also it's very important to help to make sure your customers follow through with implementing it all, right? You see so many times you purchase this product, but you don't implement it all. You don't have the endpoint detection in there. And then you do go to the hotel and that happens. And you see that so many times because it's so easy to forget or not worry about a specific aspect of it. But it's having that vision to follow through. And I even think of the word ZTNA. I remember having conversations last year where C-level people were still thinking it was zero touch, right? And and you just kind of laugh because it's new and you understand people are still learning it, but to now get to a point where they're understanding, okay, it's about this user can only do this or go in this room or access that file.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we all know there's too many acronyms in networking and security, so it doesn't make it any easier. Todd, what are some of those common missteps that you're seeing organizations make when they're adopting zero trust? Like, what are those pitfalls that they're falling victim to?
The number one is not understanding what you're buying or the product. And that falls a lot on us, though, I think, to make sure they have that understanding. Because customers aren't going to know those right questions to always ask, and I think we can become desensitized a little bit because we do that every day, as opposed to a customer that might be looking at this for the first time, or maybe they only do a network refresh every 4 years or so. So it's the knowledge and understanding what you're actually purchasing, the vision on what you're trying to do as well. That's probably the number one thing. And also properly implementing in a way where not to be so concerned with speed and how fast I can do it, right? Of course, we could do 500 truck rolls in a month or what have you, but doing it right, taking that time, doing the lab testing, and focusing on maybe those first 5 sites, getting that golden config down, that way to go, and then you can start going with speed after that. So get it right early, take that time, and know what you're purchasing.
And of the SASE framework, I think a lot of organizations adopt SD-WAN first, right? I think logically that's where a lot of folks think. Would you say zero trust would be your next recommended, piece of that pie for organizations to dive into? We all know that SASE being a framework, you don't have to actually bite it all off at once. It's not necessarily fit for everybody. So how would you, go about, asking those questions?
So in the environment that we're in, Ariaka was an SD-WAN first organization that's natively grown a lot of our technology into the security space, but we also built a platform where we can start plugging in third-party services. Most of you in the room have those 85 different contracts, and they don't expire all at the same time, but you now have that product overlap. So building that and keeping that as a flexible platform, you don't necessarily have to go a specific direction. I have some that start with the SD-WAN because that's what we're known for, and then they land and change out the next-gen firewalls at some of their branch locations or a new site, or maybe they just implement the zero trust instead of going for the firewalls because that gives them the full network reach and still the controlled environment, and then they can maintain whatever CPE's on-prem until they've ridden that asset out. But to the network transformation thing, those network transformations that you do, bring the right people into the room. The failed implementations happen when the network team doesn't bring in the security team, and the security team goes, we have this objection. Or the desktop team says, you want to deploy this agent, how do you plan on doing that? Our manage engine doesn't support that type of push out, or it doesn't support pack file, or we only do pack files. Whatever headache that they have to deal with in their day, bring those people to the table early so that you can get a clear understanding of what that total endpoint migration looks like for the long term.
I think that's a key. It's an architecture, not a point solution. It's a journey. You have to have the right stakeholders at the table. Network and security are the key ones. If the security team's not aware of network changes that are coming, those are key. But you also see, you talked about the desktop team, I'd extend that even out to application owners, sometimes even human resource type, stakeholders have to be pulled into that, because you are often affecting how people get their day-to-day work done, and you will often run into resistance from those teams. I can't change the way that I do my job, but yet the company wants a higher level of security. So how do you overcome that? If you can get the stakeholders to the table early, that helps. Sometimes you need help from other, resources within the company to kind of get to that level of alignment. It's a transformative type journey, so there's no one right place to start.
Yeah, and I would agree, we often recommend, you have to have your network and your security teams at the table when you have these conversations. Having siloed management structures are not really acceptable with these types of frameworks. And so you're really gonna come up against some real hurdles if you're not doing that, right? Everybody has to feel like they're involved, whether they're making the decision or not, but there are those initiatives in place. I don't think this would be a panel if I didn't bring up AI, so I'm gonna do that now. This is for everyone here. What advancements in AI and automation are driving resilience in this space? How is it enhancing or augmenting some of the services and solution that you offer today?
I think it's gonna start to come really big with threat detection, right? Proactive threat detection, realizing it as soon as it's possible. I think that's probably one of the more impactful things. Outside of our other AI, when you just see how we've all worked as a workforce over this last year, and having like a Microsoft Copilot and using it maybe once a month, to now you're using it every day. But it's also too, with AI, it's the visibility into the portals and understanding even what metrics you're possibly looking at, right? Because a lot of people show you the flashy screens, but what are you actually seeing? What are you trying to, what problem are you trying to solve? What are you trying to overcome?
I think from our perspective, AI is really enabling the attackers, right? We're seeing a very large uptick in the amount of attacks that are coming in through support channels, through various parts of our organization that are trying to get additional information about customers. So one of the things that I think is kind of on the horizon, or the roadmap, if you will, for SASE and zero trust type conversations is identity verification, right? You're gonna have to think about how these solutions integrate with external identity verification type solutions, an Okta, something like that, that can further validate that the people that you're interacting with are actually people and not attackers, right? That's going to be a very serious threat for us, and I think it's something that SASE providers are uniquely equipped to help with if you think about that holistically.
Yeah, AI, I mean, it's three sides of the same coin is the way that we kind of view it. One, you've got AI that's working for you. You've hired this AI bot agent. You're using Gen AI to tie in and complete ideas. So you've got one aspect. You want that to perform. You want to make sure that that works. The next is you want it to work for you in a threat detection way, where you can now see threats, you can understand what's going on, but you want a network SASE security tool that can actually understand and speak AI native language, so that you can identify those threats and treat them, so that you can see that they're different from the humans, and that maybe data loss prevention or something in the traditional sense of pattern matching no longer works, because now that AI agent that's been installed as a plug-in to your Zoom has now just exfiltrated data and can export that and say, hey, AI, why don't you hide the middle two digits as these characters? And then I'll cipher shift those, and we'll export those, and in my agent transcript, now I can exfiltrate that data. To be able to actually identify that kind of stuff, that from a network perspective, once you can see all those different AI agents, whether they're sanctioned or unsanctioned, and you can block those agents, that's important. And then the third piece, of course, is, we now have to keep our eyes on the attackers who are using the same tools that we use to do our business against us.
Fantastic, exciting stuff. As we're wrapping up here, I wonder if you could maybe address, the audience here that we brought today. What key questions should C-levels be asking when they're evaluating network and security services and solutions? When they're thinking about that network strategy, what type of questions should they be bringing to the table?
So for me, it's kind of going back to that one provider approach, first of all, and interviewing, making sure you understand what's that full product set, what can I get from these individual companies, and then fill in after that. It's having a game plan, but it's also giving yourself enough time to implement that game plan. I mean, you see so many times where, okay, I need to have this installed in 60 days. Well, what happened to the other 6 months prior to that 60 days? And it's such basic, it's really going back to the basics on that, right? Thinking out that plan, that long-term strategy, and giving yourself that time and doing it right. Because I see so many people that just don't do it right. They don't understand what they purchased. And really going back to SASE and something you were saying earlier about going to ZTNA is you still have to be cognizant because there are a lot of SASE products out there that don't have all the components either, right? And you can get fooled to hearing this is a SASE design or we're ready for SASE when they don't have CASB, they don't have ZTNA. And that again goes into taking that time to evaluate who you're really talking to. And that's huge, and that's still very prevalent out there that you could get SASE but not really have SASE.
How are you defining SASE?
Yeah.
What is SASE to you? Yeah, because it's not always the same, right? Is it Gartner's definition? Is it, the marketplace's definition? Absolutely.
I think too, if you're talking to the C-suite, try to understand if they have an internal program or an understanding of what problem they're trying to solve. That sounds silly at the highest level. You're trying to increase the security of the company, but if you spend any time with, a CISO, you'll see that they have 1,000 things they're worried about, and the better ones will have a program wrapped around that kind of classifies and categorizes the risk and impact, right? So within that risk impact matrix, you'll have answers to, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve? From that, you can ask intelligent questions about, is this the right partner? Am I solving the right problems? Are my peers in the industry worried about these same things? How does your risk assessment, Mr. CISO, align with my peers in the industry, right? That gives you more insight into where you really need to focus the solution conversation. And if they don't have that, not everybody has that level of maturity. There's a lot of smaller organizations that rely on people like us to be that virtual chief security officer. Ask them who they're partnering with to get that assessment, or I'm sure some people in the room here have partners that do that kind of work. Make sure they understand the problem they're trying to solve before you get into the solutioning.
Economy of scale. It's, anybody in that C-level, they're doing this for return. They're doing it to protect business. They're doing it to enhance business. They want some kind of return on that. But we're kind of talking about a technology, but we're also talking about an entire program, as he mentioned, and more so a platform and all these different technologies coming together. What are the skill sets that you have to outsource to get there that aren't factored into some of the current costs or the workload to do it? Are you bringing in MSPs? Are you factoring in all these other requirements to deliver this product into a meaningful way into your organization? I just dropped my daughter off at grad school. She bought a desk on Wayfair and realized that she has no ability to screw those things in together in a meaningful way to actually use it as a desk. So she had to turn around and call TaskRabbit to finish that for her. We see this in organizations the same way where, okay, we bit off more than we can chew. Maybe we have the experience and the expertise. Maybe we have to outsource it, or that expertise is busy on another initiative that we can't pull them away from. So just be conscious of that at that C-level of what does this really mean, build the program around it, design that long-term transformation journey so that you're successful.
Thank you so much for attending today, and thank you to our panelists.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.